Hey everyone, Nick from Millburn here with a special Nick from Millburn Hall Hoops and Happening show with my panelists, Bobby Blackjack and Paul Justafans. And we are honored right now to have a special guest, Jerry Carino from New Jersey Hoops Haven, Asbury Park Press, college basketball writer and news columnist, and Gannett, New Jersey Publications. He's a professor at Kane University, also host of the Jersey Jump Shot in his spare time, in his free time, Jerry Carino. And let me just say this. I went back while I was doing some research on Jerry, and Jerry's also a prophet because I got this quote on him in an article in June. Okay, I'm just going to read this real quick. The only thing I can say for sure is that I'm confident in saying that Seton Hall has a point guard that can hold his own in the Big East in Adam Bud Clark. I saw him play numerous times over the last couple of years. He absolutely tore Dylan Harper to shreds in Murray Mack's game against Rutgers, which was a pretty close game. He completely outplayed Dylan Harper, who is projected to be a top 2 or 3 pick in the upcoming NBA draft. Bud Clark can play, and I'm confident in projecting that he will be a major upgrade at the point guard position. Jerry, you nailed that one.
It was nice of you to read that. The line that you didn't read that I think I said this, and no one's expecting him to be all Big East, but he should be pretty good. So I got to tell you, even with all that, and I did see Clark numerous times. You know, I follow Merrimack because Joe Gallo, who I know really well, is from Central Jersey. He grew up 2 towns over from me in Milltown, and we're kind of roughly the same age bracket. We have some mutual friends. So I follow Merrimack, and I had seen Bud, and obviously I saw him when he came to Rutgers and played there. But I thought Bud Clark would be good, and obviously much better than what Seton Hall had last year. However, you know, I did say no one's expecting him to be an all Big East point guard. Well, you know what? He was an all Big East point guard. He was an all Big East point guard. I will say this. He caught on much faster to Shaheen Holloway's ways than I thought he would. I thought it might take a full year. And probably by mid-season, you know, Clark was really tearing it up. So he caught on fast. It's a great fit. I did see that coming. I did not see 21 wins coming. But absolutely, Clark is a perfect fit for the Pirates.
Jerry, there was a press conference. There was a game, and I think it was a road game. And there was some friction between the team and with Clark and Shaw, and I think maybe Simpkins. And after the game, basically, Shaw challenged Clark to step up. And I think from that moment, whatever clicked, just clicked, and he took his game to a whole new level. Do you remember that? It was a road game.
Yeah, not really. I mean, there's a lot of friction a lot of times when you're, you know, at this level, and when you have a head coach as intense as Shaheen Holloway, who doesn't really play favorites. You know, he's tough on all those guys. Some might say tougher on his better players, and especially his point guard, and this is one that's really in his mold. It was a big upgrade, like coming from Merrimack, and we all love the MAC. You know, I'm sure you guys watched the MAC, St. Peter's, but stepping up to the Big East level and the physicality that's involved, that's a lot. And so I think it was a big adjustment for Bud. It took some time, but he made it. And yeah, sometimes it just clicks, you know. With Kadari Richmond was never really, he's not really a shot type of player. Bud's much more in Shaw's mold. Kadari obviously is very talented, terrific point guard. I like him. I also always really liked him. But it took him, you know, the 2 full years. So year 2, you saw Kadari changing gears, and it only took Bud about half a season. So midway through his junior season, Kadari really didn't get it with Shaw until his senior year. And so I think Bud's way ahead of schedule. And, you know, yeah, Shaw's pushing buttons, of course. But, like, there's no doubt that he pushed the right button there, and it seemed like a great fit. And, yeah, he hit the accelerator midway through the season, and that's why he made All Big East.
After the loss to St. John's, Clark and others came out, you know, and basically you got the impression, and you wrote a great article on this, that we were going to play some more basketball.
Sure.
And then we ended up doing a show Sunday night because there was a kind of an about face.
Yeah.
What happened? What do you think happened with that?
It's a great question. So it seems like Clark was at the podium, right? He was at the dais after the game. He came into the interview room with the press conference room, and Adam Zagoria asked him, what's next for you this season, and then what's next for you, next season. And he said, we got some more basketball to play,
Right.
and I'm looking forward to playing it. And then, I want to be a Seton Hall Pirate. So that was that. And then he's pretty emphatic about it. He didn't have to answer that way. Now people are on the spot. There's 100 media in the room, cameras. Who knows what's going through someone's mind? And then I went into the locker room and I asked
basketball to play.
I asked AJ, State McRae, and specifically because he's a captain, he's kind of the spokesperson for the team, about them playing in a consolation tournament, and he was all for it. Like you saw his quotes. I mean, he said, anything. We're all basketball players. Anything
Right.
to play hoops, and we feel like we got unfinished business. And then I spoke with Najai Hines, and we touched on. He said, "Yeah, we still got a lot of basketball left to play." So, speaking with Shah, I talked to Shah right after the announcement came out Sunday, and he followed the similar method, which I have no problem with. He let the players make the decision. And we praised it in 2024, right, when the team decided to enter the NIT, and then they were ready and had a great run. So I'm not going to second guess his decision to leave it up to the players. It seems like the right thing to do. You want them to be bought in. But this time he let the whole team decide rather than just last time it was just the 5 guys, the
Right.
5 senior starters. This time he let the whole team decide. And I don't know if that dynamic changed because of that. He didn't sort of leave it in the hands of his leaders or captains. I think Shaw wanted it to be unanimous or very close to it. That's kind of the impression I got. Whatever vote they took or discussion they had, it wasn't near unanimous, it seems like. And so you still could have had. It's very possible that Clark, State McRae, and Najai Hines were all for playing like they said they were, but there could have been 4 or 5 guys in that conversation who weren't, and basically they decided like we can't do this without everybody, and so that's kind of what happened. I was very surprised because you hear from guys like Clark and State McRae; those are the team's leaders. You figure everyone's going to fall in line, but it's hard to say what happened behind closed doors. And Shaw kind of thought maybe the sheer disappointment of the moment of not being in the bracket kind of got to the guys and influenced their decision. I mean, that's probably the best guess. But I have to take Shaw at his word that he left it up to them, and that was what they came out with.
Hey Jerry, any idea? I'm sorry, Jerry. Any idea what the vote was? What the split was?
No, it just sounded like it wasn't. It sounded like there was a lot. It was pretty split. I didn't get the impression that there were. Again, I'm just guessing, speculating based on the conversations we had. I had with Brian Felt and with Shaheen Holloway. I was under the impression that there was enough people that couldn't play that they couldn't come to a consensus. That didn't want to play or couldn't play. They couldn't come to a consensus. I don't have a vote number, but it wasn't just like one holdout, I don't think.
Now, we were under the impression that the Big East, then Seton Hall, was contractually obligated to the Crown. But then we started reading reports, and maybe it was just semantics, that then Seton Hall turned down the NIT. Any light on that? How could that be?
No, so see, they can't see. I didn't explain this in a story. It's pretty complicated. There's a lot of fine print, but I'm pretty sure that you can't, if you turn down the Crown, you can't play in the NIT, or there's actually some sort of penalty.
Right.
I think that's written into the language of the deals. I think, and again, I didn't report this because I'm not 100% certain. It's very complicated, and you'd be amazed how people don't really know. The Crown's new; it's somewhat shrouded in mystery, and a lot of these details are pretty hazy. But it seems to me that they once they turn on the Crown, they could not go in the NIT.
Right, that's what we thought.
I don't think this. If you look at the NIT bracket, there's nobody. I don't think there's anybody in there that turned down the Crown. I think the high majors that are in there are in the non-affiliated, non-Fox affiliated conferences, like Auburn's in the SEC, right? And Oklahoma's in the SEC, and they're not Oklahoma. Oklahoma's in the Crown. Auburn's in the SEC, right? And they're in the NIT. So I think the 3 leagues that are affiliated, that was some sort of contractual deal. In any case, if you're one of the top two teams, according to the net, you have to go to the Crown, or you can't play in the NIT. That's my understanding. And Seton Hall falls into that category. Indiana would be the Big Ten, would have been the Big Ten's number 1 team. Like, they're the Seton Hall of the Big Ten this year, and they also turned down both because you can't do just the NIT. I actually really liked the NIT 2 years ago. I thought it was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
The Walsh was awesome. It really energized the players and Shaw and really changed everybody's mind about that season. And it happens quickly. Like the NIT is good because it happens quickly. You're playing 2 or 3 days later. You just go right into it, and you're home. The teams that got snubbed in the NCAA tournament are home. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of reasons maybe to say yes to that. Whereas the Crown, it's 3 weeks hence. You got to go across the country. Maybe it's just harder to get up for that at this particular moment in time when your bubble has burst. Again, I'm just sort of playing amateur psychologist here, but I do believe it was not an option for Seton Hall to be in the NIT.
Now, Jerry, you look at the Crown, and we were talking about the money. Apparently, it's $300,000 if you win it.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think it's $100,000 if you second. If you and $50,000 if you win a game, which is NIL money, so it goes right to the players.
It gets split among the players. Like last year, Nebraska split their $300,000 13 ways, or however many guys they have on their roster. They split it evenly 13 ways.
So $25,000 if you win this thing for 3 weeks' work is, I don't know how much you make, Jerry, but I don't make that.
That's relative to us, but who knows what these guys are getting. All this stuff is so secretive. Who knows what they're already getting or what they think they're going to be making in a few weeks' time. That might be pocket change compared to what some guys are going to be getting once free agency starts. So maybe that had something to do with it.
Fair enough.
Hey, Jerry, is the NIT in trouble? I mean, only four power conference teams are actually playing. The rest are all mid-major.
No, I think the Crown's in trouble. I think the Crown is in trouble because
Really?
I think the NIT is going to outlast the Crown. This is just my opinion. The Crown had to contract from 16 to 8 from last year this year because they couldn't fill out 16. They had to really scramble and invite in mid-majors to fill out a 16-team bracket. They had to go pretty deep to fill out an 18 bracket. I mean, Rutgers is in it, and they're 14 and 19. They were turned down by numerous teams, and they only could get one Big East team to sign up. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the Crown. I realize why they have it in April. They want inventory, on the sort of standalone week when there's a week between NCAA tournament games leading into the Final Four. It's just too far away, and I don't know. And the fans can't. It's a hardship for fans to attend. I don't really like the concept. I think it's cool to play extra basketball. Like I said, I'm all for these consolation tournaments in theory. I think it's great that Rutgers is going to play some more basketball, but I just don't know how much longer the Crown can last when it's hard to fill out a bracket of 8 teams. The NIT is a long-standing institution. It's been around for 70, 80, 90 years, 80-something years, and they still have no problem filling the field. There's a lot of fish in the sea for them, but it's become more of a mid-major event. But no, I see the NIT sticking around. It's just not what it was. Like when Seton Hall won it, it was the last true NIT, right? That was the secondary tournament. It's now not that way as long as the Crown's around. But we'll see how long that lasts. You've seen the CBI come and go, the CIT. I don't know. We'll see if the Crown has staying power. I'm skeptical.
It's just a strange format, too. As you pointed out, Seton Hall would have to go 3 weeks without playing a game at all. And then you play like 4 games or 3 games in 5 days. It's a weird format.
Yeah, the lag is the thing. It's so long from now. This is a time when a lot of teams are resting, catching their breath after the season. If you don't go right into it, I think it makes it a little bit harder.
It seems the Crown should be more of a preseason tournament. Something you do start of the season than at the end.
Yeah, but the whole point of the Crown's existence is to give Fox counter programming to the Final Four because, CBS and their affiliates have the NCAA tournament. Fox doesn't. So Fox wants some programming, and this was their counter program. That's why it exists. It's made for TV event. So you have to view the schedule through that prism,
Jerry, you did an article about Rutgers saying yes to the Crown. What was that thought process, and how did that differ than Seton Hall's thought process?
So Rutgers on spring break this week, so they didn't actually have a meeting, and I think they went home. They traveled home from the Big Ten tournament late last week thinking their season was over, and Steve Peichel sent everybody home for spring break. They're all at various places, and then they got the call, right? Because the Crown, they need a second Big Ten team. They had Minnesota. Indiana turned them down. A couple of the other teams above Rutgers in the standings said no. They got Minnesota. They needed a second Big Ten team, and so they came to Rutgers, which finished 14th. And Steve's like, well, I gotta talk to my players. He kind of took a similar approach to Holloway. Like, I gotta have player buy-in to this, although he couldn't have a meeting because the players were all home. So I think Steve called the players, or Steve's not a big texting guy. He must have called them. He'd rather talk. Wow. It's kind of old school like that. He'd rather talk on the phone. He must have called them all individually. I know he definitely called his key guys. And I think he heard resounding yes from enough guys. I know Tariq Francis was gung-ho about it, but they didn't have a chance to sit in the room and discuss with each other. And they also didn't have the disappointment of missing the NCAA tournament. Like, they knew they weren't going there. And they finished the season playing fairly well. So it was just a different sort of vibe with them. But ultimately, it was the same thing, is that Steve let the players decide. Well, he wanted the players to buy in, and they did. Different people, different circumstances. But I give them credit for doing that and wanting to play on. And, I don't know. Is that going to help Steve, retain some of these guys? I mean, ultimately, the money's going to talk, right, fellas?
Right.
Like, the money's going to decide almost all of that. It's not who likes who and who how long they're playing. The money's going to talk. But if, for those guys, if the guys who are going to return, I'm pretty sure Tariq Francis is going to be back. If they have a couple guys who get to play some more ball together and develop a little further as a group, it could be a net positive for them. So I am personally, a little disappointed Seton Hall didn't play, because I liked watching this team play.
Right. Yeah.
And I would have really enjoyed watching. I wasn't going to go to Vegas, I don't think. I did go to the NIT final in Indianapolis, which was a great experience. I don't think I was going to go all the way out to Vegas on Easter Sunday, but I would have definitely watched and written it up. And I liked watching this team play. So just as a fan of the sport, and Jersey basketball, I'm a little disappointed that they said no. I have no problem with the players deciding. I'm a little bummed they said no, and I'm glad Rutgers said yes, so I get to watch them. But different people, different thought processes. You don't know who was hurt, who was just absolutely hit a wall. I'm going to take Bud at his word that he wanted to play, but he was limping. I saw him in the concourse, he was limping after those games. His quad's pretty banged up. Now, I think Bud would play no matter with one leg, So I'm going to say Bud take him at his word that he didn't want to play. But there might have been other guys with injuries like that just needed to shut it down. You just don't know.
So, Jerry, I'd like to change the subject if we could.
Sure.
This is the time of year where every college in the country announces that they've just been screwed. But the Big East has been, pretty much, getting, a lot of disrespect, for lack of a better way to put it. And I know that Val Ackerman on a lot of the fan boards has been taking a lot of heat. So my question to you is it true that the Big East needs a more, the stronger advocate in those rooms? And the second part of the question is, would that even make a difference given the fact that the football schools think that they're pretty much the only college sports schools left?
It's a good question. My only real beef with Val was 2 years ago when Seton Hall, St. John's, and Villanova Providence all got left out, when they were like all on the cut line and they all got left out. And there was Val said nothing. She said nothing. It was just terrible. Like, it wasn't going to make a difference if she spoke up after the fact. But, you got to understand who your constituents are, and you got to show you feel their pain a little bit. I mean, people were really upset about that. Coaches, administrators, players, fans, most of all. Like, Val needed to be proactive. Not proactive, reactive, and just feel and show that you felt their pain, and maybe rattle the saber for next time. You see a lot of these commissioners speaking up for their league, really pounding the podium for their league, right? And you didn't see that from Val, and that was a huge disappointment after the 2024 snubs.
Especially since that was the year that they took every team from the Mountain West Conference, and they all went out in the first round.
Yeah, and Seton Hall was clearly better than Virginia. So they were clearly better than Virginia. They should have been in the tournament. But so I thought Val, Val is a behind the scenes person, but like she did a poor job with that. So I had a beef with that. but the rest of your question, look, the commissioner's main job is to negotiate the rights package, right? It's the media rights package, which is where all the income really comes from.
Right.
Like all the revenue that's going to be shared with these players, it's going to basically fund these rosters and are funding a lot of these athletic departments are coming from this TV rights package, whatever it's worth, 8, 9, 10 million a year to each of these schools. I might be a little off, but like the general neighborhood is correct. So that's the commissioner's main job. So a lot of people, like my father, is a huge Big East fan. He loves Seton Hall, likes Jersey basketball, and he was pissed because so many games were on Peacock, and he's like, "What the hell? I can't find these games. They're all over the place, and the Peacock drives me nuts." And I understand that, but I also at the same time, they were trying to maximize, the leverage they had and get as much money as they could for all the schools. And that's another reason why the Big East is very skittish about expansion, because like you add another school, that school is going to dilute what everybody's getting already in media rights. So unless that school, I respect Dayton and St. Louis. I mean, they're terrific programs, and then it'd be nice to add a 6 Midwestern team and have 6 and 6, but like they're not going to move the needle in a media rights deal. They're just going to take another. They're just going to make Seton Hall's slice of the pie smaller and everybody else's. Right. Whereas like Gonzaga, which is not going to happen, but that they would move the needle. Notre Dame, if they ever divorce from the ACC because their football is an independent, they would move the needle. I don't know that many other schools move the needle. So it's a long way of to answering your question, is that the main job is to negotiate the media rights deal. If the Big East schools feel like they got a good media rights deal, then that's going to be the way they evaluate Val. I do think Val can do a little better with the optics. But I don't know that – I'm not so sure that any commissioner could help them in the room. You know what I mean? That's a good question. I don't know that anyone has the answer to how the Big East can improve its chances in its Selection Sunday, except by performing better in the non-conference schedule. The Big East has very good coaches. I don't think the coaching's a problem. There's a lot of really good coaches, including some who performed pretty badly this year. Mm-hmm. They probably just need more money because, like a lot of these Big East schools, their roster budgets are smaller than that of these. The reason why the SEC's got so many teams in the tournament is they're awash in cash. They're buying all the shooters and big men, and they're kicking ass in the non-conference. And that stuff all comes back to haunt you on Selection Sunday. So how does the Big East fix that? With a bigger media rights deal, but it's easier said than done because those schools have football to drive their media rights.
Right.
And so it is a conundrum that I'm not so sure just swapping a commissioner could solve. Although I think Val could do better banging the desktop in favor of the league. Yes. I don't know, but is there someone else who could actually improve the standing of the league? I think only money's going to do that, guys, because they already have good coaches.
Right.
I think the schools just don't have as much money. And we all thought, here's another thing, and I'm going into the weeds here, okay? But maybe this is of interest to your audience. We all thought that, and this was the reason why Kevin Willard jumped from Maryland to Villanova is because football was going to eat up all the lion's share of the revenue for rosters. So there's a $20.5 or $21 million roster revenue sharing cap, which really doesn't come into play in the Big East, right? Because these football schools have $50+ million annual revenue from the TV deals, media deals. But they have a $20 million cap imposed by the NCAA. So in theory, what happened at Maryland was Maryland said, all right, a football coach is getting $17 million. Their football program sucks. And your men's basketball program, which is, could potentially compete for Final Fours and has won a national title in fairly recent times, gets $3 million. And Kevin's like, well, what the hell? $3 million. I'm going to go to Villanova where all $7 or $8 million of that TV rights deal is going to basketball instead of the stupid $3 million I'm getting from Maryland. But so in theory, we all said, yeah, that's the way of the future. But what's happened is it sounds like to me that there's this NIL clearinghouse run by Deloitte, right? And so every NIL deal, which is different from revenue sharing is coming straight from the schools. NIL is on top of that. So raised by fans, corporations, etc. Donations. The clearinghouse is supposed to really scrutinize these and approve these NIL deals. And it sounds to me like the football schools have found a million loopholes and end runs around it.
Imagine that, Jerry.
No surprise, right? And so
They
while
will. By the way, there will be a women's basketball player who gets paid $700 to talk at a graduation ceremony, and she'll get censored.
So while you're right, you're probably right. So while let me finish this thought. So you're probably right. So while in theory, let's just pull out a school, for example, like Illinois is only getting $3 million in revenue share compared to let's just say Georgetown's $6 million. Illinois is just running I'm saying in theory, Illinois is running loopholes after loopholes for NIL with their giant, corporate base and fan base and alumni base, and their actual roster budget is much larger than you think. That's why these schools are still dominating the NCAA tournament field, and why they dominate the the free agency period. That's the answer.
So I'm going to ask you one more question, then I'm going to shut up. I promise. I don't know. Did you see Frank Martin's quote, the coach of UMass?
No, I didn't see it.
So he was talking about the net versus the art.
Well, okay, I got him.
Been designed to make sure that the mid majors didn't get any bids. So it was just he was basically saying he was in the room in South Carolina when they redid the numbers. And I was just wondering, do you ever hear from coaches complaining about
how the
net works?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just a shame because why do we need an algorithm to determine a team's fitness for the NCAA tournament? I just think use your brain, use your eyes. You really yearn for the days in a smoke-filled room, right? When
right.
A bunch of people who just watch a crap ton of basketball would just get together and hash it out over, cigars and bourbon. I mean, I don't think I'm too far off there.
No, you're right.
I think to me that almost works better. You're using an algorithm, and with the mid majors, and I think Frank Martin's probably true. It's probably what he's saying is probably true. You hear about it a lot. I've had discussions about it with the Princeton coach, Mitch Henderson, when they were very good and couldn't sniff an at-large bid, and they had some years where they were 20-2, 23-3, and they couldn't sniff the at-large conversation because the way the algorithm is, it really it penalizes you for the way you schedule. But how's Princeton going to schedule? They have to play 14 Ivy League games, and then no one wants to play them. No one will play them. Who are they supposed to play?
Trap game.
They have two. No, they had to take a St. Joe's instead of a home and home. They did a 2-for-1. 2 games at St. Joe's, 1 at a neutral site in Trenton, New Jersey. That's how Princeton has to schedule. And they're not the only ones like that. There's a lot of mid-majors like that, and that stuff just kills your net. You can't play anybody. You have no opportunities. Princeton, I'll tell you a story. This story is not widely known. Princeton was the year after they made the Sweet 16. They already, because these Feast Week tournaments are locked in years in advance. Mm-hmm. They were locked into an 18 Feast Week tournament in Florida, and their draw was against Georgia. Georgia said, we're withdrawing from the tournament if you don't change our draw, and threatened to pull out of the tournament. And so the organizers tried to find someone else to play Princeton. No one else would, and they kicked them out. Then Princeton had to pick up a bunch of D3 opponents. How is a good mid-major that Princeton, which is good enough to get an at-large bid in some years, how are they supposed to function like that? That's what's also laid the A10 low. The A10, you guys remember, the A10 was like a 4 or 5 bid league with your Temples and your St. Joe's and all these really good teams that would maybe make a run. You'd have 1 or 2 teams in the Sweet 16. The A10's been laid low because no one will play these schools. And it stinks. And so the net penalizes them. So instead of quad this, quad that, and doing it all in an algorithm and math, just get people in a room who watch basketball and understand it and can reward being successful rather than an algorithm. Yes, I agree that the net system and the algorithms and having the computers decide who's worthy is really hurting mid-majors. And if by doing that, they're hurting the whole enterprise.
Yes. And the problem that I have with it is that they set the beginning of the season, somebody sits down and decides what your initial net is. Now, if you decide that 20 teams, that 14 teams in the Big Ten are going to all have nets 30 or lower, then they're playing quad one games their whole lives.
Yeah.
Right.
When Seton Hall got down toward the end of the season, we're saying there really aren't very many quad one opponents other than, St. John's and UConn that they can make an impression on. And now, to your point, Jerry, they played those teams, they got beat, right? If they won those games, we wouldn't be having a conversation about how they got screwed. But
look at St. John's. St. John's got a 5 seed because of what? They lost games in November. Who cares? That team is red hot.
Right,
that team is playing big time basketball. They lost games in November, so they're a 5 seed. Get out of here with that. So that's just so stupid.
And they're in the same bracket as UConn. Like how did that
happen there? Yeah,
it's just careless, dumb, or whatever. They were. If you want to say it's an anti-Big East bias, maybe you're right because the power schools are in charge. But it's just a stupid system. I would rather some guys in a room be saying, like, St. John's is really good right now. They should be, a 4 or 3 and not a 5. Who cares what a computer says of what they did in November? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that's just stupid. Yeah, you want to look at the body of work, of course, but there's got to be a way where it's not outsized what happened in November, which seems to be the case. And like Seton Hall's problem, they couldn't gain any traction because they had to go at least 12-8 in the league, maybe 13-7 to get in this year after going 10-1 out of conference.
Right.
And because Kansas State wound up crapping itself, like that win became totally devalued. That's a good win winning out in Kansas State on the road at a Big 12 school in a packed house like that. But that became a nothing. You got nothing for that in the end because they wound up not being very good. So I don't know. I think it's a flawed system. There's probably some better way to merge analytics with a human element without elbowing out the human element. I do think that's a big problem. And it's a huge problem for the Big East because you're so reliant on those out of conference results. And now you lost the Big East Big Ten challenge. The Big Ten pulled out of that because they want to play, 20 conference games. Mm-hmm. You lost the Big 12 shootout which was guaranteeing the Big East games for a few years. So you lost 2 really good crossover opportunities there. That really helped Seton Hall. Like Seton Hall, those wins over Maryland in that event really helped Seton Hall for a couple of years under Willard,
Right.
And they beat Indiana one year. So not having those does hurt also. There's no question. Like you're not getting an Indiana or a Maryland to come to the Rock probably without the help of that event. And so that's a problem as well. So there's a lot of things stacked against the Big East here and especially against the mid-majors with the way this system is set up. Like the Big Ten is it's like, what's the right word? It's just feasting on itself because they're fattening on themselves because their nets are so high. Now, the other thing I want to bring up in this is KenPom, which I've always had a bone to pick because KenPom should never have a ranking in November. Like, what is that based on? Mm-hmm. These rosters are turning over completely or like 70+% every year. Why does KenPom have a ranking in November and then you go from there? Why is there a starting point like that in KenPom? That should not be the case. And then you start in KenPom in 80 or 90 and you have to climb because you have a new roster. That's just so stupid. KenPom should start like the net. It should come in sometime in December, mm-hmm. after at least a month, and then it should come in. And I bring up KenPom because KenPom factors in. It's a predictive metric that factors into the whole, the way they see these teams. So that's just another stupid thing.
Jerry, let me just change gears for a second. And I love reading your stuff because what you're writing, I'm thinking. And I'm going to go to Big East officiating. What is going on? I mean, Matt Potter and Shaw, Gaffney and Driscoll and Danny, like there just seems to be like these officials, like they're not, I don't know. They're brazen. They're very thin skinned, like anything. And then they're going after coaches. I never saw that. And then in our game against Creighton, McDermott's at midcourt and no one tees him up. Like, I don't get it. I don't get the, there's no consistency. And then they just seem adversarial at times.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a tough sport to officiate. Let's start there and let's say that. Let's be fair about it.
Right.
You have a lot of really outsized personalities in the Big East that can be difficult to rein in. And so it's a difficult job. And so,
right.
But I do think believe that John Cahill, who is the guy in charge of, he's the supervisor of officials for the league, I do think he does a lousy job of pairing the right officials with the right games.
Right.
I'm going to zero in on the Seton Hall's game at UConn. Like, that's a very important game for Seton Hall. Like, they win that game, they got a real chance to make the NCAA tournament. It's a signature win they needed. They had played UConn tough already. And John Cahill sends a junior officiating crew, sends 2 really young refs. Mike Palau, who? How is this guy going to go into stores and deal with Dan Hurley in that environment? He's not. He's going to get steamrolled.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened here. And so, people complain about the older refs and the names, the Driscolls, the O'Connells. Lord knows James Breeding, who is thin-skinned and has officiated some terrible games.
Right.
But the one thing about those old refs is they're not going to let Hurley or Patino push them around. And then so the Big East sends the 3 junior officials to do that game. It was just absolutely insane. No wonder it was 21-2 in the free throws in the second half. And it was so bad that the Big East, I'm telling you, they apologized to Seton Hall. Now, I don't know who called who. A lot of times after you have a controversial game, someone from the athletic department, whether it's a coach or an AD or someone in the administration, will talk to the Big East. Someone from the Big East. I don't know who called who. It's commonplace to talk the day after, but I do know that the Big East apologized that they got that call wrong at the end of the game when Bud Clark was, basically they tried to intentionally foul him, 2 hands on the player, and there was no whistle, and Bud tries to chuck up a shot. He wasn't going to get the 3-shot foul, but it became a turnover because the whistle everyone was expecting never came. It was just so dumb. And so to see that happen, okay, that was bad judgment on John Cahill's part. And then you take a ref from that game, Matt Potter, and you put him on the Big East semifinal with Seton Hall and St. John's. Are you nuts? Cahill should be saying, okay, those guys are off Seton Hall the rest of the year. I got enough refs. We messed that one up. My way of making up to Seton Hall, evening it out, is we're not going to put those guys on the game anymore for the rest of the year. You see them in November.
Right.
And then 2 weeks later, he's doing the semifinal in the Garden, Matt Potter. That just shows you how dumb, how stupid, how thoughtless the Big East is when it comes to assigning their officials.
Right.
So to me, it's a lot about assigning the right officials for the right time. But Matt Potter, he called the foul, the concussion foul on Bryce Aiken. I think he's just a crappy ref. But for him to get in Shaw's face was highly unusual, unprofessional.
Right.
The refs if Shaw said something, I don't know what he said. If he said something out of line, there's a tool to deal with that. It's a technical foul. Mm-hmm. That's the ref's tool to deal with an out of line coach. It's not to step into a coach's face and act like you're a barroom bouncer. No, nobody does that. Zero officials do that. Zero. Except Matt Potter at the Big East semifinals with Shaheen Holloway. Now, are there repercussions for that? Of course not. You'll probably see Matt Potter doing the final freaking 4. And that's the problem. That's the problem. I don't think you have good and bad everything, right? There's good and bad doctors, there's good and bad teachers, there's good and bad sports writers, but there's no repercussions for being a bad ref. There is no okay, you did a crappy job on Seton Hall. Let's give Seton Hall a break from you. There is none of that. And it's just stupid and it's careless. And if you want to be pissed at John Cahill, who doesn't get it as the Big East supervisor of officials.
But these guys get graded at every game, right? There's someone at they're supposed to be grading them.
They do. But my theory is on Breeding, and everyone complains about Breeding. I don't like the guy either. He's super thin-skinned. He has a million stoppages in his game. We know he was a crew chief for the worst officiating game I've ever seen. Seton Hall Marquette in the 2019 Big East semifinal. 48 fouls.
When they threw Powell out and then brought him back in. Yeah,
7 ejections. Right. It was the worst officiating game I've ever seen. So Breeding was in charge of that debacle, okay? My guess is they do great. My guess is Breeding is very good on the out-of-bounds calls. He's probably got very good eyes. He gets the out-of-bounds calls right. He's good with the clock. There's a lot of things that go into officiating that he probably gets right when they go over the film in slow motion. Game management's not one of them. Mm-hmm. So they grade these guys, but they don't always grade them on the right things. Maybe okay, so gets the out of bounds calls right. That's wonderful that he gets those right. But he shouldn't be in Shaw's face. Can we grade that?
Right.
You know, so like that's something that they don't seem to look at, which is beyond comprehension to me.
Hey, Jerry, let's one more change of gears here. Tell us your journey from Seton Hall student to where you are now. I know I'm a Seton Hall grad. Paul's a Yaley, watching this team right now, and Nick's a grad as well, as are his children. What was your journey from student to where you are now?
So, you know, when I was at Seton Hall, I was
and what year did you graduate, by the way?
95, and I joined the Setonian and WSOU. And the great thing about Seton Hall for me was that I was able to do a lot of different things. Like I almost went to Rutgers. A lot of my friends went there. I grew up in the shadow of Rutgers, but it's a big school where you have to kind of pick one thing probably, right? And you can't do a lot of different things, juggle things like I did at Seton Hall. I did all these different things and all these different experiences you can only have on a smaller, mid-sized campus. And I was on the track team, and then I was doing the Setonian and SOU, and there was a lot I had to choose, and it became very obvious that I wasn't going to have a professional future in track. And so I stopped doing that after 2 years, and then I was focusing on the media and making a career out of it. And that was a really big springboard for me. I had a great experience in student media at Seton Hall. And then I came back to my hometown paper, the Home News Tribune, and I knew somebody there who got a foot in the door covering high school sports. And I covered high school sports exclusively for like 6 or 7 years. And then, I always had college basketball in the blood, right? I grew up with it. Obviously, I was at Seton Hall for some great years there. And when an opportunity arose to cover college basketball, I jumped on it. And this was 2003. There was an opening. I pushed hard for it. I had worked hard moving up to it. I got a chance, and I never gave it up. I sort of grabbed on and didn't let go. And like I have students, I teach at Kane. I have students who ask me every now and then, do you want to be promoted to cover the NBA, the NFL? And I always laugh when they say that. I'm like, no, that's not a promotion. Absolutely not. This is my end game. This is what I want to do. If I'm not covering college basketball, then I'm not going to be in sports anymore. I'll just write a news column, human interest, full time. Like this is what I want to do. And I help out with the high school sports coverage. I help out on Rutgers football. I do some other college sports, but I like the intimacy of college sports. I love the sport of college basketball and the characters who are in it. A lot of personality with the coaches and players. Football is a lot less. It's sort of been Belichick-ized where the personality has been bled out of it as far as what the public sees. But I like the intimacy of it too. Like I have friends who cover the Knicks, and like they don't get to know the players and coaches very well. They're just a number, the reporters, and that's not me. Like I can go to a practice and be the only one there and really get to know these people. I can find stories that no one else has and tell them to the public. I can pick up the phone and talk to Shaheen Holloway or Steve Peichel after something happens like Selection Sunday and find out why and hear the emotion in their voice. Like there's access there, and there's an intimacy that I love about college sports. And so this is what I want to do. When I first started covering college basketball, I started with Seton Hall, and I added Rutgers because our staff shrank. I added both, and then I just on my own I sort of added the rest of New Jersey, and I sort of brought. No one was covering these mid majors really, and there were some really good ones. Princeton, St. Peter's had their years, Monmouth. So I'm like, I'm just going to cover all these schools, and when the mid majors do well, I don't cover them in micro fashion like I do Rutgers and Seton Hall. But when the mid majors do well, I'm going to be there and do some stuff. So I've enjoyed that. Some of the best times of my career have been covering St. Peter's run to the Elite Eight and going with Princeton to Louisville for the Sweet 16, even at Princeton for the Ivy League tournament that they won, Ivy Madness. And I was at Monmouth's championship game in Washington, D.C. in the CAA and their final against Hofstra. So I really enjoyed that too. I've sort of expanded it to be a statewide beat. But that's it. I really just worked my way up from the bottom, answering phones, clerking, covering high school sports, then adding college basketball. And now I've gotten my brand to a point where this is what I'm known for. And this is really all I want to do. I hope to be able to go another 10 years. You never know in the changing media landscape, but I'll go as long as I have the energy. It does get a little tougher, guys, as I get older. Like I got to get my kids on the bus at 6:30 in the morning. That's tough when there's a 9 o'clock game the night before.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Jerry, drink a lot of coffee, but that's where I'm at, and I do love it. It is a labor of love.
Jerry, we're fortunate to have you in New Jersey because, as you said, you are given some attention to the mid-majors. And Nick told you, I grew up in Connecticut. And if you aren't playing UConn's men's or UConn's women's basketball, you are not going to get a single column inch in any of the papers up there. And that's because, it's an economic decision. They don't have as many sports writers, and they have to cover only what the people want to read about, and what they want to read about is UConn. Can you speak a little bit about what you're seeing in the area of sports media? What's going on with the major outlets like the
sure. That's an interesting question because we're shrinking. Like every legacy media outlet is shrinking, right? And there's a lot of reasons why, but the main reason why legacy media and newspapers in our case, are doing badly is because when we all went digital, when we launched websites in the 90s, we gave away all the news for free. And we did that. We gave away all the news for free on our website for 20 plus years, but you always had to pay to buy a newspaper, right? And so suddenly, we realized, oh my God, we're giving all this stuff away for free. And now, because of the way like the web is different than print, we're making a lot less money off advertisements. We need subscribers the same way we have subscribers to the newspaper.
Right.
But now you have trained 2 or 3 generations to get their news for free. And it's like you're trying to put toothpaste back in a tube, fellas. And it's really hard. And the revenues are really falling because, like, God bless my father and the baby boomers, they're still buying newspapers, but they're the only ones buying them. A lot of people are getting the news for free online. And if we don't develop a subscriber base, by the time the baby boomers leave us, we're going to go under. And so there's been a contraction going on. So that's part of it. The staff is like a fraction of the size it was when I started 20 plus years ago. Everyone has to multitask and do the job of 2 or 3 people, which I do, and I'm not complaining about it. I love this job, but you have to do more because there are fewer people. But to your point about covering the mid-majors, we get everything that we do gets listed by, like, there's a log that we have that our bosses see how many people read it online, right? Page views, clicks, whatever you want to call it. That stuff all gets listed. And obviously Seton Hall, Rutgers, and college basketball are big drivers for the views. And they continue to be, which is why I continue to do it. We dropped the Knicks, we dropped the Devils. We have a Rangers writer. We dropped the Devils. We use a New York sister papers Rangers writer. We dropped the Knicks, the Devils, and because there wasn't enough people reading them. But like Seton Hall, Rutgers numbers are healthy. So I do in my spare time, I try to cover the mid-majors. Like, they're not generating a ton of clicks. They're not generating a ton of readership. But here's what I'll tell you about it. You find good stories that way. And when an FDU beats a Purdue, I know the players, the coaches. I can get the right story. I can get them on the phone. I can give the context that no one else can because I did that feature on them that hardly anybody read back in, November or December. Same thing with Princeton. Same thing with Monmouth. Same thing with St. Peter's. So to me, like, it's worth way beyond what the numbers say to develop context there. Like, sometimes that St. Peter's coach becomes a Seton Hall coach, Right. So to me, it's part of the old-fashioned part of the job where you're making a down payment on something later by doing these things that maybe aren't super widely read. I think that way. Not a lot of my colleagues do, which is why you don't see a lot of coverage elsewhere of these smaller schools. But to me, it's an investment on something later. And my bosses have seen that pay off enough times where they give me the latitude to do it.
To that, Jerry, how do you think Grant is doing at NJIT?
Great. You understand the challenges that Grant faces. He can't take transfers except grad transfers and people coming in after their freshman year. NJIT does not allow, because of the curriculum, it's a very good school, does not allow transfers after sophomore or junior year. Wow. That cuts out a big part of Grant's roster building ability. That's a huge handicap. And for him to get that team in third, and not everyone in his league is like that. It's not like it's the Ivy League where they all have these strict transfer rules. Grant is sort of battling uphill with that. And so for him to place third in the league, higher than they've ever placed before, under those circumstances, when he has a difficult time replacing out transfers, is a tremendous coaching job. I think he's doing great. I watched them play. I went to see them, and they played like you would think a Grant Billmeyer team would play. They'd punch you in the throat for a loose ball, and that's Grant, right?
No, Jerry, just to get one back to the comment about the state of the media. I guess the concern that I have as, again, just a fan is, when I read your stuff, I understand that it's somebody who's got access, is in the locker room, and is writing with some sense of authority. I have a Facebook group for my alma mater's basketball team. I watch the game on television and write 3 or 4 paragraphs about what I saw. And somebody said to me that it was great coverage. Well, it's not coverage. It's a guy watching the game on TV, putting it on a blog. But do you think that's going to be the future of sports coverage? That it's just going to be a bunch of amateurs like myself? Or are we going to continue to have writers with, credibility, for lack of a better way to put it?
I think there's room for both. There's enough people who love the sport that there's room for both in the tent. But it does, like, the job has changed. Like, when I first started, a big part of going to these games was describing what happened in the game. I no longer emphasize what goes on in the actual game a lot in my game coverage. It's what happened in the post game. It's what I saw in the stands. People say, why do you write about fans so much? Like crowds. Well, because like you can't get that from watching on TV. Right. Like if you're watching on TV, you can watch the game. You know what happened. You can access an instant box score now. You know what the stats are. You can even find the coach's press conference. But the atmosphere and what's going on in the stands and how it impacts the game is something that you can't get from watching on TV. So like I feel like that adds value. That's why I always reserve a takeaway for what the scene, the atmosphere in the stands. And then the post game becomes very important. Like I think the ability to ask questions when you're representing a fan base there, and the ability to talk to players that the average blogger, person posting on Facebook doesn't have. Like that's a responsibility that you really have to nail in order to add value. So like you have to work a little harder to add value with so many other people, like publishing their thoughts. But I think it's doable, and there's room for all. And I read other people's what people publish on Facebook and on blogs and stuff, because like maybe Howard hangs on. The end of Howard, UMBC. UMBC missed a 3-pointer at the buzzer. Howard won by 3. All right, the madness is on. So I read the other stuff because sometimes people pick up something I didn't see. So like I can't see everything, and my head's down a lot. I have to publish an instant story when the buzzer, like my head's down sometimes in the second half. I miss some things, and sometimes people see things or just that I missed. So I think there's plenty of room in the tent, but you definitely got to do the job a little differently than you did years ago. You got to work a little harder, and it helps if you have the access. So one of my issues with Seton Hall has been, and they're very good with me. Like I can get a return phone call, I can go by to practice, but in the post game, like the players and Shaw sit at the table and do a thing all at once, and that's not really productive because Bud Clark is an awesome personality. But like when he's next to Shaw on the dais, he's super uptight, and you don't get much out of him. And so no one's trying to trap the guy and get him to say sensational stuff. We just want to see his personality shine through and get a little bit of insight into how things work, why something happened, or how he's feeling. And when a player's like engaging, like Bud, like super engaging guy, when you talk to him on the side or in the locker room or at a practice, or just as a fan, he's super engaging and ebullient guy, but then you get him next to Shy and doesn't say much. And that kind of hurts. It hurts me because like I'm not really giving the fans something that they can't get from watching the game. So like Rutgers, for example, they come in, the players, they do the dais together with Peichel. He says his bit, Peichel takes his questions, and then he leaves. And then we get to approach the players informally and sit around the table and chat. And that's when you get a lot more of the cool insights. Like Seton Hall was that way under Kevin. The players would come in first. We'd sit around with them at tables, no dais, no podium. You'd sit like regular people and talk, and then it would be relaxed. And a lot of times it would be really good. You get to see a lot of personality and insight. And then Kevin would come in and do his presser. So I do wish, and I've tried, we kind of would get the players, just in a more relaxed atmosphere. I think that would help me add value even more, but I do the best I can with what I got.
Jerry, you had said that that you write on things that people can't see on TV, and you write about the stands. And you wrote an article on our few articles on our student section, or lack thereof, this year. And on this show, we had a couple students on, and we explored this, why they don't go to games and why they go to games. Do you see this as being just a trend where the students are too busy or not into it, or? Because I always said win and they will come, but we won this year and they didn't come.
It happens. So it's a trend. It's sort of a nationwide trend. I think Seton Hall's not the only place, but it's very acute at Seton Hall. Maybe because of the size of the school or the campus location relative to the arena. So it's what I would say is it's part of a nationwide trend, but it's very acute at Seton Hall. Whereas, if Rutgers has less student enthusiasm, well, there's still a ton of students, and there's still a big school, and their arena is still on campus, and they can walk to it or take a 2-minute bus ride to it. And so they're still going to fill it. So at Seton Hall, there's some additional hurdles to it. But the end of the story is that not having students at the games really hurts the home court.
Yeah.
And this is a real, and Shaw notices, the players notice, it's a real thing. And they got to figure out a way to fix it. And if they can't fix it, then they got to sell those seats like they did for the Villanova game and the St. John's game that took place over break, because you can't have that empty section behind the basket. No. It's bad for optics, and it's bad for home court environment. It's bad for home court advantage. So I think Seton Hall is an acute version of a national trend, acute enough where it has to be addressed. And I brought this up with Brian Felt when he was nice enough to come on my podcast. It sounds like they're going to do a real deep dive into why and can they fix it, and then go from there. I think that should be something they focus on in the off season.
Hey, Jared, did you ever cover the team when they were at the arena, Brendan?
The Meadowlands?
Yes,
of course. And as a student, I was there too. And the early years of my beat, they were at the Meadowlands. And I do think the Rock is a big improvement on the Meadowlands. I think it's a much better arena. The Meadowlands was a crappy arena. Now there's some good memories there, but it was a crappy arena. So yeah, I did cover it. I do think the Rock's an upgrade, although not everybody's thrilled with the idea of going to Newark. That is true. I don't know that Newark is the real deal breaker as much as just an off-campus arena.
Yeah, because I graduated in '92, so I remember going there, and yeah, it's a better improvement as far as amenities and whatnot. But are we ever going to get those crowds that we had in Brendan Byrne?
It's a different world. It's just a different world. As you're talking, 30 plus years ago, and that Seton Hall team was also in the top 10, top 20 constantly. They were only a couple years removed from a Final Four, and there was a national championship caliber team, but it was just a different world, And so I don't know. I don't think so. No, even in the great Miles Powell teams, they didn't get. They were not filling they were not coming close to filling the Prudential Center. They had a couple crowds where they had to open up the top. But I do think the world has changed. Things have gotten more expensive and everywhere. There's more options for things for people to do. It's easier to watch a game at home or on your streaming device. I think those days, unless you're the tippy cream of the crop, I think those days are probably over.
Any more questions, guys? Oh, Jeff, one more question for me. Again, my freshman year was the year they went to the finals. We got screwed. Worst call ever in college basketball history. Do you think in 2000 that the Miles Powell team, do you think we had a chance that year? Were we going to the Final Four?
Well, Final Four is hard to say because you never saw a draw, right? Like the tournament's so much about the draw.
Right.
But what we could say for sure is they were getting a protected seed. They were a top 4 seed. And that means they were going to be in Albany, which is not very far from North Jersey. What is it, about 2 hours, 2 and change? So there was going to be a huge that arena in Albany was going to be painted blue. And there would have been obviously gotten a really favorable first-round matchup. But that second-round game, that 3-6 or 4-5 game, they would have been a big pro Seton Hall crowd. So I think there would have been there would have been a really good chance of them winning that game. We'll never know. We don't know what the draw would have been. I can't project beyond that because you don't know who they would have stuck with. The committee, you never know who would have stuck them in the bracket with.
Mhm.
But I'm very confident they would have been in a Sweet 16, and then from there it's matchups. And it's a shame because, like at Seton Hall, like you're not gonna. That's a once in a generation or once in a decade team. You're not gonna have that every year, and it was just such a cry. The pandemic was terrible on a lot of levels, but as a sports fan and someone who covers sports for a living, it's just always going to be a big empty what if that we'll never know. And I think it took a lot out of Kevin Willard too. Like I think it really broke his spirit a little bit because he felt like he had topped out. That was the best team he was ever going to get together at Seton Hall, and I think it really broke him that they never got a chance to see what they could do on the biggest stage, and I can totally understand that.
Jerry, were you at the Garden for that afternoon game that got canceled at halftime?
No, because Seton Hall was in the late game.
Yeah,
late game.
So I know. I was just coming up for the evening session. I was home.
yeah, I was home too. I got the phone call. Stay home. It's over.
Yeah, it was
That
terrible.
was it.
Oh man, I don't even want to relive that.
3 months of nothing.
All right, well, Jerry, thank you so much. This hour just flew by.
Yeah.
Well, I
Jerry,
appreciate it. It's good for me too because I don't get a chance to really get into the deep dive, even on my own podcast, because I'm covering the whole state. I don't get a chance to deep dive on sort of the art of the profession a lot, and so it's cool to have an opportunity to do that with you. And I want to just sign off by saying that I really appreciate Seton Hall fans. They've stuck with with me and with our coverage to a degree that it's gonna remain a staple in the changing media environment. Like Seton Hall is very high on our menu board, because people have been so loyal about reading and subscribing and engaging. And like I think as much as some beats have disappeared over the years, Seton Hall beat's not going anywhere. As long as I'm upright, we're going to continue to cover New Jersey college basketball with Seton Hall as one of the main actors. And that's due to fan support, because you can't do it without the fans. So I appreciate everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
Sir.
guys. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.